Blue-White Breakdown returns. I'm Bob Flounders, and we have back for the first time since mid to late December, the one and only David Jones, and thrilled to have him back. We're going to talk about quite a few things, some of them Penn State related, maybe some of them not Penn State related, Dave, but we haven't had a chance to talk to the audience, you and I together, for a while.
I got to warn you, first of all.
Good.
Kaiser has not had his run, and he's resting now, but I think he's going to be unruly. So just be forewarned.
All right. So should we bump up the rating of this podcast to like R, or is it still PG-13? What's going to happen when Kaiser wants
rated M for mayhem? What it's going to be.
That is fair. I don't blame him.
Right now, resting.
I hope
soon gonna be trouble.
I hope there is a nice long walk, run in the future.
Yes. Romp in the snow.
We're gonna get rolling on this. So it is all about your dog, and it always should be. Dave, I'm gonna read 5 names off.
Oh, is this like Roy Firestone as a word association?
I'm gonna give you 5 names. No, you don't have to comment on all 5, but after I say the 5th name, what's the first thing that jumps out to you? Ready?
Okay, let me do it to you first. Regret. Your thoughts?
I've had a few. All right, you ready?
All right.
Okay, you're gonna pretty much figure this out right away. Here we go. John Donovan, Joe Moorhead, Ricky Ronnie, Kirk Shiraka, Mike Yurcich. What strikes you about those 5 names?
They all got whacked. And now the made man is your new man crush. And I want you to just admit it for the people out there. You've got a serious man crush for Mike Yurcich.
It's not a man crush yet, but his
he's going to leave, Bob. He's going to leave you just like he leaves everybody.
He won his opening press conference with the media. Sure, I thought it was very impressive. The guy's a football guy. A refreshing approach. A lot like Joe Moorhead in some respects, in that very comfortable talking with the press, can answer any question, can handle himself. I never thought that Kirk Shiraka was super comfortable doing that. I thought he obviously did a nice job, but I think Mike is on a different level when it comes to talking offensive football. You can ask him anything and he will go into detail, much like he did, Dave, on Tuesday. But I haven't had a chance to talk to you. I know that you've probably written about it a number of times, but
this morning.
But I would just say this though, and just 1 year for Kirk Shiraka. How surprising was that for you, or maybe not surprising, given the way that the season played out?
Well, it was surprising because it's 1 year. Even Donovan got a couple of years.
He did.
And it's not like Donovan performed, although he had some handicaps that nobody else did based on the offensive line and the quarterback. He was kind of forced marriage with that didn't really fit the system. But even he got 2 years. So that was surprising. But, when you thought about it, these days, if you don't jump on something that you see right away with all the transients in coaching, all these guys can make so much more money with one step up the ladder. The head coaches have to react all the time, and they have to act proactively. I think that's what they're starting to do now. They're starting to think, we're never going to have the days where Fran Ganter stays behind Joe Paterno forever as a lifetime coordinator, where Larry Johnson, where you can keep somebody like that in the stable, or even Ron Vanderlinden for a long period of time, for a decade or more. It's over because the money precludes that. The money in assistant coaching precludes that. Well, what was Mike Yurcich making? I mean, he was making $1.5 million, which was a 10% decrease from $1.7 million, which he was making as a coordinator. You've had all these crazy coordinator salaries. Dave Aranda, what he was making before he took the Baylor job. What was he making? $2 million or something?
Yes.
At LSU.
What about my man Bo Pelini? What was he making at LSU? Because he earned it. Dave, he earned it.
He got, speaking of whacked, So I think when I thought about it, Franklin has to be proactive, as a lot of guys do. And to your point about how easily he spoke to the media, I don't know if you read what I wrote this morning, probably not, but what I wrote about is that he just looks like a head coach, doesn't he? He looks like an eventual head coach. He looks like he's polished. And that's in a number of categories. He looks like a salesman. He can sell recruits. He's probably great in the living room with families. He's probably going to be great at selling donors. College football is so much a sales job compared to the pros. Well, your pros, it's about acquisition and player development or player appraisal, wouldn't you say, compared to college football?
Right.
And maybe salary cap issues, and it's got very little to do with sales. I mean, if you know what you're doing, that will come through. But in college football, a guy like Mike Yurcich can go a long way simply because he can sell to a number of different strata that you have to in college football. And it's not all about the X and O's. I mean, it starts with that, but it's got all these other ramifications. And that's a huge contrast between Yurcich and Straka, who you could never see as a head coach, could you? You could never see him as a head coach.
I think, especially not maybe at a name program.
Yeah, maybe in the MAC.
The head coach in the MAC,
right. He could be a head coach in the MAC, like Lance Leipold. He could do that. But Lance Leipold isn't getting a job in the bigs at the high major level, at the Power 5 level, substantially because he's not one of those guys.
Right.
So this is a guy I see as a coordinator rental, not a coordinator purchase, especially if he succeeds. If they have a big year, either this year or next year, he's out of there and he's going to be a head coach.
Dave, you led me right into my next question for you. It's beautiful. James Franklin makes this move. It's not just about what Penn State's offense looked like on the field in 2020, and it was not often pretty, but he's got to keep future recruits in mind when you talk about selling Penn State football. He's got to produce an exciting brand of football, not only for the fan base, but 40 points a game, the explosive plays, not playing sloppy football. He's got to woo, 4 and 5 star recruits, because this latest class was okay by his standards. The next class could be very good, but he's got to keep those guys. And I think they want to see an offense that they want to play it. And I think that's one of the reasons why maybe he pulled the plug early on Kirk, because that was not an exciting offense.
And what do you want in a recruiter at this level? I mean, what do they need right now? We talked about it yesterday on the phone. God, it sounds like something you'd hear on CBS, doesn't it? We talked about this before the game. They need a take the top off the defense wideout, and they don't have one. You could say Jahan Dotson is, but he really isn't. He doesn't. He's close, but he doesn't have that burner speed that you need out on the outside. You're not going to have to devote a safety over the top to him, probably.
We're going to save this for the fall, Dave. And if Jahan takes another step forward, we're going to over and over again. Just
I know.
Fire.
But would you agree right now?
Well, I mean, he did lead the Big Ten in receiving yards. He was fairly dynamic, and he has progressed every year at Penn
incredibly.
State.
Yeah, he has.
Yeah. So I would not discount him taking another step forward. But is he like KJ Hamler, scare you to death?
Right.
I think you think of KJ Hamler, Dave, at Penn State, and that 93-yard catch and run against Ohio State's 5-star.
He just went zoom,
and he ran away from him.
Yeah,
he just ran away from him.
Yeah,
so I kind of get what you're saying, but I also think Jahan Dotson is going to get a copy of this podcast, and you're number one on the hit list now, Dave. So
all right,
go ahead, dig that hole.
Take a stance. Do you agree right now?
I think that he has to take one more step to be that guy, and I'm not sure.
Well,
I would not count him out.
No, I wouldn't count him out either. But right now, he's not Allen Robinson or Chris Godwin at the end of their careers, right?
Correct.
Am I right? Right.
All right.
Yeah. Ann and I watched Groundhog Day on Groundhog Day, by the way.
that Ned Ryerson you're doing for me?
Yeah. Am I right?
I know my Groundhog Day. Come on. It's like one of my top 10 favorite movies. And
it was great, man. It was great. It still stood up. It still stood up after 27 years or whatever it was. It was still hilarious. I don't know.
Bill Murray is just so great in that movie.
It's his best movie. It's maybe his best movie. Yeah. Lost in Translation and Groundhog Day. But Harold Ramis set him up with so many lines, so many Bill Murray lines.
But it's all in the delivery. A lot of it's in the delivery and the timing, and he's got it in spades.
Gosh, you're an upbeat lady. I just cracked up at that. Anyway, we digress. Go ahead. Next talk.
Yeah. So I was going to talk about your column, but I just think that also James, as a CEO and as a recruiter, knew that he couldn't really sell maybe the 2020 football product as the future to recruit.
Yeah. And
I think that was a big part of probably. He's always kind of thinking about what's next, and I think.
And can't you see Yurcich? Can't you see Yurcich in a situation like that? Just he doesn't have to be this hard sell guy. He could just sit back and say, "This is what we see you doing. This is how we see you progressing. This is how you could be an NFL receiver."
Right.
You would be transfixed by this guy. He just looks like he's got that fighter pilot confidence that he looks like he knows what he's doing, which is more than half the battle.
And not Val Kilmer as Iceman. We're talking Tom Cruise as
Maverick. Are we going to do this again?
That's the comparison. Dave, I wanted to ask you this about him. So he played in the PSAC at California. He had a couple stops in Pennsylvania. But his biography says he's from Euclid, Ohio. You're an Ohio guy. Where is that? And when I was listening to him, he sounds like he's from Northeast Pennsylvania. Is Northeast Pennsylvania and Euclid, Ohio, are they similar in terms of?
You just whack the top off an area from, let's say, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, all the way across to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they all talk the same.
He sounds like he's from Scranton. I went to Scranton. I'm like, this guy might have went to the U. Like sounds like he's from the coal region.
Well, all of those people, my wife and I have like a hobby where we try to figure out where people are from before we know.
Yeah.
We're annoying as hell with strangers and stuff. Yeah. It's very hard to decipher upper New York State, extreme northern tier of Pennsylvania, northern Ohio, northern Indiana, any of that. They all sound kind of the same. Anyway, Euclid is Cleveland. And it's very hard to decipher all those people. Ohio is a weird state in that you've got three major cities where people talk completely differently. And it's not that big a state. And yet Cleveland sounds like what we just talked about, that kind of nasal, kind of flat A's. And then Columbus is
don't be making fun of your accent. We're trying to get to know the
It's
guy.
not me, man. I'm the farm boy. Columbus is like a farm country, like a farm reporter from the morning. And then Cincinnati is Dixie. I mean, if you go over, we used to buy alcohol on Sundays in Kentucky because you couldn't do it in Ohio when I was in school. And you in Cincinnati, you go over the river and man, the little girls at the convenience stores like, thank you, come again. It's completely, it's like Dixie. It's like you're going down. You got three completely different voices in Ohio.
Take me through a Dave Jones high school senior alcohol purchase across the border. What were you buying, Dave?
I was a total dork, Bob. I know that's hard for you to.
If you say wine coolers, Dave, it's over. You're out. You're out.
I had a fake ID, and we went to the beer stube down on campus, and you could get in with the fake ID there. When you were 18, and the beer stube was like this total slop house on the Ohio State campus.
What were you buying?
You could get 3-2 beer. I think I was legal with 3-2 beer but I was getting in there at 17. Did you have 3-2 beer in Pennsylvania? I don't even know.
So when I was like 18, it was still 21 in Pennsylvania, but in New Jersey it was 18, and I was like 10 or 12 miles from Phillipsburg, New Jersey.
I thought you were going to say you were just like 10 or 12 when you went over the border into Jersey.
So it was not a far journey for me to drink or buy beer in Jersey, but those were good days. I love reminiscing.
But was that 3-2 beer?
I think essentially it was. I'm trying to remember. Yeah. I'm trying to remember what I drank. I just know I drank it real fast because it just seemed like the thing to do.
And a lot has changed. And a lot has changed since then, right?
I'm consistent. I'm consistent.
What I think of
Greg Pickle will back me up on that.
What I think of is the bad beer we drank back then. I mean, did you have a local brand that was just urine? I mean, just horrible, horrible stuff that you drank it because you could afford it.
My dad drank Carling Black Label.
Yeah, that's bad. That's
kind of what I grew up with, drinking, in the
basement. a local brew.
It is not great.
Stroh's. Well, that's a Michigan beer, man.
Well, they had a Stroh's plant though in Allentown.
Oh, okay. Well, but it's kind of a regional beer. We drank this stuff called Gambrinus. I know you've never heard of that. There was a beer we got at the Pace High. Oh, we got Iron City Light before.
I like Iron City Light. Don't mock it.
Oh my God, that was just piss. It was horrible. But you could get a case. You could get a case of that for like $3.95. I'm not kidding you. Yeah. At the Pace High carryout.
It's a gourmet beer now, Dave. Hey, so Penn State fans, this is some of the banter you can expect from Dave and I in the off season. Who knows? We're probably going to talk a lot about boozing because there's not a lot of football on the docket now that signing day is over and we're not sure about spring practice. So if you just want to subscribe and listen to us on the Blue White Breakdown, we're halfway home on this issue. We talked already about a little bit about John Donovan. We've talked a lot about Mike Yurcich, his roots, and we've talked about beer selections when we were much younger. Dave, let's pivot to something you wrote about. This is a Thursday afternoon as we talk about it, and you already touched on it. But the bigger question is Mike Yurcich. he had some good players at Texas last year. He had Justin Fields in 2019, and Oklahoma State had some pretty good offensive talent pass through there when they were playing pinball football in the Big 12. When you look at Penn State's skill talent, what jumps out to you? Obviously, he's got to get Sean Clifford, I think, to play better. What jumps out to you, though, as far as maybe something he's really going to have to focus on in spring, based upon what you saw in 2020?
Well, he does not need a quarterback. You heard his answer. When I think it was you asked him about a running. Did you ask him about how much to run your quarterback? That was somebody else.
No, that was Richie. That was Rich Scarcell. Yeah. I thought that was an interesting answer.
Yeah, it was, because he is not known as somebody who needs to run his quarterback. And he said what all coaches say is when you can get a hat on a hat and 11 on 11, that's what the running the quarterback gives you, especially in the red zone. But he is not a guy who's going to, like Shirako, who's going to run, or Urban Meyer for that matter, who's going to run his quarterback 15 times a game. He doesn't like it. He doesn't want it. He wants Mason Rudolph didn't do that at Oklahoma State. He wants his quarterback in the pocket, getting the ball out, flinging it out there, and taking shots downfield vertically. It's about pushing and pulling the safeties in the middle of the field, play action, establishing. It's not like it's a constant aerial circus. It's not. He wants to power run and then set up the vertical shot between the hashes downfield. There was another question about throwing to the sideline because of the wider hashes in college football, because that's what he mentioned that's what they give you. But from everything he's done in his career, he wants to hit that skinny post down the middle for the big chunk play, hopefully a touchdown. What they're missing is right now, unless Jahan Dotson does not develop, and he might take that leap because, like you said, he has developed.
He's listening closely, Dave. Be careful. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think he wants that guy, and he'll try to make Dotson that guy, and maybe he will be that guy. But he needs that guy to scare the deep secondary, because he does not want those guys in run support. And that's kind of the problem you've had with Penn State the last couple of years. Would you agree that they've had too many defenders and run support because they're really not scared of the deep shot, right?
Yeah. You have to really go back to when they had, when they had defenses on tilt. They had a running quarterback in McSorley. They had a back like Barkley who could run or catch, and they had a matchup nightmare at tight end in Yurcich, and they had Godwin and even Hamilton. It was really hard. It was really hard, I think, to you were so worried about Barkley that you had to pick your poison, and Moorhead was great about exploiting the matchups that were there, and he was great at in-game adjustments to exploit those matchups. And this Penn State offense is just not that far along in terms of balance and talent. They have some young players, they have some young tight ends and young running backs, but Dave, I think it does really start with the quarterback making the right decisions, getting the ball out on time, not turning the ball over. And I think you'll see them take a step forward. But to your point, I don't necessarily look at this Penn State offense right now, and at all of the skill possessions included, I don't necessarily consider them maybe a fast offense, because I think they're talented, but I don't know how many, with the exception of Dotson, I don't know who are the other game breakers. Like, who are the other guys that could take it 50 yards? Dotson did it.
Maybe it's a couple of those young receivers that we saw glimpses of. Yeah,
maybe it is, but that's something he's got to identify. And I think between that and getting Clifford better, because I think Clifford has to play better. Because I don't know that there's an option B right now.
There isn't.
They got Taquan Roberson, who's under 200 pounds and hasn't done anything yet.
He is not. Let me tell you, he is not a Yurcich quarterback.
Yeah,
just
and
not.
They got Christian Veilleux, who's a freshman. It's really. I wonder maybe if they're not done adding players via the transfer portal, because it just seems like if anything happens now, I don't know where they turn. We'll see.
Well, it's actually a hope that Yurcich will be here 2 years, because I don't know if he can have the success that he needs, and then maybe he can recruit somebody in the interim. But I think the thing is here, they're going to have to play fast. Right. And they're going to have to do what Penn State's basketball team is trying to do and has been very, very nearly successful in doing, is playing so fast that it wears the other team out. They can't make decisions on the fly. They can't get the right personnel in the game, and they can't decide how to cover fast enough. And I'm sure he'll try to do that. He's going to run pace like we've never seen before.
Yeah. And maybe it was no spring practice, but Penn State's offense was snapping the ball too often with 1 or 2 seconds left on the clock, taking penalties. They were not playing fast. So I think James wants to get back to that. And I do think that will cause problems, I think, for defense. Dave, 2 quick points for you. Ready? This one's a question. I think it's right in your wheelhouse. I wrote it down. Dave Jones, how loud are Alabama practices about to get with the trio of Nick Saban, Billy O'Brien, and Doug Marrone coaching the players?
And OB and Marrone are big buddies.
They're like that, and they're really they will push the envelope and they get after your ass. So and Saban's also a little bit like that.
Bob,
so
it's gonna be like us with Nick Horvath. You better be ready to be coached hard.
I think it's a fascinating staff, and I think it'll be a really good staff, because I think that they're not, O'Brien and Marrone might be a little bit loud, but they also know what they're doing. And I think Nick will be able to manage those guys. He's managed some characters while on the Alabama sidelines. He turned Sark around. He had Lane Kiffin. So
it's like a coaching rehab spot, isn't it? You go there to get your career back on track.
But Nick won't take you unless he knows you know your stuff.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? He's not gonna roll the dice unless he knows there's some upside, and I think there's a lot of upside. That's just what Alabama needs: a more potent offense, a more precise offense with a great running game, a good offense. That's just what they need, because that was lacking this year.
The thing is with them, they could run any personnel they wanted and succeed. So, OB could go in there and run 14 personnel, he could, and it would work, Yeah. Let's have 6 tight ends. And, he loves that anyway. He probably ran more 13 personnel than 13 personnel than anyone in the NFL, right?
Yeah, I'm happy for him. I'm glad he's back on the sideline.
Yeah.
I'll be curious to see what that offense looks like. You're right. Dave, let's close with this. Penn State players in the Super Bowl. Specifically, I want to talk about Chris Godwin. He is one of my favorite players to come through Penn State the last 10 years. I've been on the beat since 2002, not as long as you. But I wanted to ask you your thoughts about him. And Dave, can you remember his initial breakout game? That's redundant. Can you remember his breakout game at Penn State?
No, I remember.
I'll give you some hints if you want.
Everything I remember about him was blotted away and wiped away by that spectacular Rose Bowl. So that's what comes to mind right away. I mean, I went back and watched that with Nick, my kid, who's, he watches a lot more pro football. He's kind of like, he's a lot like you. He obsesses about the NFL. He's in Pittsburgh in college watching the Steelers. But he did watch that Rose Bowl with his buddies, and he was taken with Chris Godwin right away because it was so. I mean, he was making every kind of catch. He was making one-handed catches over the middle. He was making juggling catches down the sideline, and he had a big game in a big game. So
correct.
That's why you'll love the guy. I mean, he was, and he had a huge Big Ten championship game. He was everywhere.
That was Saeed Blacknall.
Two
things. So Godwin, fearless across the middle, 50-50 ball like Allen Robinson, yak, and he had a knack for making plays on third down. But the breakout game, I'm going to give you two clues. I want to take you back. It was a 60-degree day at Yankee Stadium in late December.
Oh, yeah. I was, why I was sicker than a dog that day. Yeah, dude.
It was the Pinstripe Bowl, 7 for 140.
I was barely alive that day. And we were outside in that outdoor press box. I just wanted to get home. Yeah, I did. Against Boston College.
Yeah,
and that was Hackenberg's last regular season game. That was 14. It was 14. Yeah.
31-30.
The last game of the 14 season.
Yeah.
No, I'd forgotten that. I do remember the Michigan State game in 16 where he had a big game then. He was hard to deal with because he could high point balls and yet he was a big dude. He was both strong and springy. And man, those don't call on and fast enough. Like, I don't think he was any faster than Jahan Dotson.
Correct.
Right? No. Yeah.
Built, he's a little bit stockier and built a little bit more like a running back. But Dave, you talked about the Rose Bowl. I talked about the Pinstripe Bowl. Big game player, I thought. And I think the Super Bowl will not be too big for Chris Godwin. No. I would be stunned if he did not have a very nice day against the Chiefs. He had a couple drop passes against Green Bay, but he also made some big plays in that game. I just think fantastic player. The Bucs got him in the third round, a steal. But he's one of my favorite players to watch, and I just another that he keeps getting better.
Another steal they got out of the Big Ten, and I remember having an argument with a bunch debate with a bunch of the big name national writers that I friends with from years ago, and they started. I said at the end of the 2018 season that Minnesota's 3 receivers were as good as anybody in the country, and they started laughing and mocking me. Now, who's starting to play big for the Bucs? Tyler Johnson.
Well,
Tyler Johnson is a really, really good player. He every time he's had a chance, and Brady loves him. I mean, clearly Brady loves him.